All right, well, we were going to tell a Florida man story, but then we kind of was setting up our what we wanted in frame, and I had to get a book to set on, and that reminded me of another Florida man story. So now I need to tell it about the time I had to sit on a pillow to be high enough to see over the dash to fly the airplane. Now let me backtrack from that. In the late 1960s, my father ran the Texaco gas station in Dunnellon. At that time, Dunnellon, Highway 41 through Dunnellon was a very busy thoroughfare. This was before there was I-75. So all of the traffic, most of the traffic from South Florida passed on Highway 41 through Dunnellon. There were several gas stations in town, and all of them had very profitable businesses. There was ample business to support them, but there was not much infrastructure, or there was not much in the way of communication. At that time, the Dunnellon Airport, which is actually an abandoned World War II glider training base. Into the 60s, it was an active airport. The runways were there, but there was not much in the way of buildings, or there was no telephones out there. It was just runways in the middle of nowhere, essentially. My dad had some friends that had a home on the Rainbow River, and they would fly into town to visit the river house, but they had no way of communicating with them to tell them that they were coming into town. Well, that's not true. They did have a way of communicating with them. They didn't have email, text messages, cell phones, landline. The way they communicating with my father to tell them they were going to land at the airport and they needed a ride, there was no Uber then either, is they would essentially like dive bomb the gas station. We'd be sitting around the station, and this plane would come from altitude and dip down to about 200 feet and make a pass over the roof of the station, which is, I'm sure, would get them banned from having a pilot's license these days. At the time, I was about 4 or 5 years old and bored out of my mind. I would just sit on the curb and watch cars go by, watch my brothers fill, gas cars up and wash the windows and air the tires up, check oil, do all that stuff. It was just boring as a kid to sit there and watch. But it was always fun and exciting when the random airplane would dive down on us like it was about to crash. When they did that, that was a message to my father to send out one of the teenagers at the station to go pick them up from the airport. It was effective, and of course I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It was memorable. So this particular time, they had buzzed the station, and they sent out my oldest brother to pick them up, and I went along, tagged along for the ride. And when we went out there, we got there, and they were low on fuel, and they wanted to fuel up the plane to be ready to leave on the outgoing. So what they were going to do is make the short hop over to Jim Taylor Airfield in Ocala, which had fueling facilities. Nothing unusual. I'm sure that happened many other times. But on this particular time, since they were going over and they let my brother, they let me go along too. And my brother he was a pretty cool guy. And he convinced them to let me fly the plane. So when I got up to sit, I was not tall enough to sit over the dash. So they had to take a jacket and wrap it up for me to sit on so I could sit over, and they gave me control of the plane, of course, with close supervision. But what it was, I couldn't quite see over the dash. And when you're flying an airplane, when you push the steering wheel down, it's to dive. And when you pull the steering wheel up, it's to climb. And what happened was I couldn't quite see over the dash, so I tried to pull myself up with the steering wheel so I could see over the dash, and I took the plane into a steep climb, and I almost stalled us out trying to pull the steering wheel up. So that was my first and last time at flying an airplane, and they'd never allowed me in an airplane again. When I got into the tax deed business, I wanted to learn how to buy property at tax deed auction. And I had no idea about the process, but I knew it was really hazardous and you could lose your money. So the first property I bought, I went to the tax deed auction. I went and looked at the property. I did homework best I could. And I went to buy it, assuming I was going to lose all my money, but I bought cheap property, so I wouldn't lose very much, was the mentality. So I went to tax deed auction. I bought 3 empty lots for $700 a piece. I went out after the auction and I took my equipment and started cleaning the property. The people across the street came out wanting to know what in the world I was doing. And I told them I had just bought the property at tax deed auction and I was building Section 8 housing so I could rent it to low-income people. And that got their attention. And the lady said, my husband is on the way home from work. He wants to talk to you. So he came. I got off my equipment and spoke with him. He's a very nice gentleman. I know I remember his name. He was mechanic constructor of the Dunnellon airfield. He said, hey, I want to buy that land from you. I said, well, it's reasonable. I said, I just bought it today. So, I hadn't held it all day yet. I just paid for it. So he offered me $1,200 per lot and as a bonus to take my kids up in his airplane. So I bought and sold my first tax deed properties for a $500 per lot profit same day. And I got thrown in to take my kids up in the airplane. And we flew over our house in Homosassa and we saw their treehouse from the air and the manatees in the river. And it was a great experience for my children. And a little bit of Florida man exchanging a piece of property for going for an airplane ride. That was my only other time in a small airplane. Both fun experiences in their own way.